All right, people, you thought the Viva on the streets were going to end? They're never going to end. I will be doing Viva on the streets. I don't know, until... What do you say? Your paws are disgusting. You just touched me in the face. This Viva on the street is about the vaccine passports, which are now mandatory as of September 2nd in Quebec, British Columbia, Manitoba, and our dear Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is now pressuring other premiers of other provinces to, quote, step up to violate our constitutional rights.
We will create a $1 billion COVID-19 proof of vaccination fund. If your premier mandates that everyone in your local restaurant or gym or other non-essential locations must be fully vaccinated and show proof, we'll pay for the development and rollout of that program. A vaccine mandate for non-essential businesses is a good idea.
What do you do with someone with an allergy? What do you do with someone who's immunocompromised, or someone who, for religious or deep convictions, decides that no, they're not going to get a vaccine? We're not a country that makes vaccination mandatory, for example. We're not a country that makes vaccination mandatory.
We're not a country that makes vaccination mandatory.
This is about doing the right thing and the smart thing. Already, Premier Horgan and Premier Legault have stepped up. And I certainly hope that here in Ontario, Premier Ford steps up as well.
And a lot of people are saying, okay, well, this violates your constitutional rights, but it's justified under Section 1 of the Canadian Charter of Freedoms. Section 1, which says, the Charter guarantees the rights and freedoms, except as can otherwise be reasonably limited, as prescribed by law, as demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. And there are three provisions in there, three elements of that Section 1, which are detailed, nuanced, and most people don't fully appreciate them. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. Most people take that Article 1 to say Section 1 says any and all of your rights can be limited as justified in a free and democratic society. But there are three conditions, one of which is reasonably, the second of which is prescribed by law, and the third of which is demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. And those things need to be broken down. Because the first of which is reasonable limitations. Okay, fine. That is to be determined by the courts, and we're going to get into that in a second. The second is as prescribed by law. So that is not to say that any and all rights can just be willy-nilly violated. It means that they can be violated as prescribed by law insofar as the measures... What are you doing? Insofar as the measures that are violating your constitutional freedoms are in fact bona fide law, have been passed as law, which these vaccine passports, what do you say, have not. And why have they not? At the very least in the province of Quebec, because François Legault says, I don't want a public debate. I don't want to have a discussion. I don't want to have to show our evidence, because I don't want Quebec citizens being exposed to conspiracy theories. So instead of prescribing this limitation by law, I'm going to prescribe it by edict, by mere whim of the government, dictate, no public debate, no legislative assembly, no passing through the standard legislative process. So it's arguable whether or not the vaccine passport, as implemented in Quebec, is even prescribed by law in the first place, because there hasn't been any discussion, public debate, or anything. And in case any of you think I'm being hyperbolic or exaggerating, this is from CTV News. Debate on vaccine passports would expose Quebecers to conspiracy theories. François Legault, the Premier of Quebec. He does not want to have the public debate because he thinks it would expose Quebecers to conspiracy theories. No joke, no exaggeration. Reasonable limitations. There is a Supreme Court decision that sets out the criteria, sets out the conditions that determine whether or not a limitation of a constitutional right is demonstrably justified, and that is the Oakes decision. And it's a complicated decision, but the bottom line is that there needs to be a necessity. There needs to be a correlation between the measure implemented and the rights violated, and there has to be a determination that without which it will not be able to be implemented or it will not be able to be justified. The Oakes test. First, the objective to be served by the measures limiting a charter right must be sufficiently important to warrant overriding a constitutionally protected right or freedom. Second, the party invoking Section 1 must show the means to be reasonable and demonstrably justified. This involves a form of proportionality test involving 3 important components. And we are quite the ways off of that as far as it goes for the vaccine passport in the provinces, because there's been no discussion, there's been no evidence, there's been no proof that it is reasonable, necessary, correlative, and that the rights being violated are justified in virtue of the sought-after objective of the vaccine passport. And the amazing thing, the truly, I mean, it's amazing or it's horrifying depending on what your perspective is that you have a Prime Minister of Canada who is encouraging the premiers of various provinces to step up.
Already, Premier Horgan and Premier Legault have stepped up. And I certainly hope that here in Ontario, Premier Ford steps up as well.
To implement a vaccine passport. And some might say that that is stepping up to protect the citizens, and others might say that that is stepping up to violate the Constitution in the absence of any reasonable demonstration that the constitutional violation is justified, correlative, or effective. And what you basically have in all of these provinces are one premier after another, get over here, one premier after another, implementing willy-nilly measures that violate our constitutional rights without any public debate, legislative process, or whatever, under the pretext that it's for our own good, that it is somehow a foregone conclusion that it's justified in the absence of any debate. And you have the Prime Minister of our country egging them on, urging them on, justifying their unconstitutional actions. And then some people reflexively say, well, you have no constitutional rights because all of them can be violated under Section 1 of the Charter, as though that Section 1 doesn't itself have specific criterion for, is it criteria or criterion? It's criteria. Specific criteria for implementation justification. No, it is not Section 1 living on its own. All of your rights can be violated as justified in a free and democratic society. It's that the justifications have to be reasonable, they have to be demonstrable, and they have to be prescribed by law. And I dare say we are missing all 3 of those as relates to the vaccine passport. And instead what you have is a Prime Minister egging on the division between Canadians, scapegoating, demonizing the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, and basically pitting one segment of society, the majority, against the other segment of society, a minority who are not vaccinated, as if to say all of these problems are your fault. The law is on our side, even though it has never been tested. We are going to egg on every premier of every province to violate your constitutional rights in the absence of any court testing or bona fide satisfying the criteria of the Oakes condition, the Oakes test. And I guess he's determined that this is the good strategy for re-election, even though it is unconstitutional, unlawful, and above all else, totally unjustifiable and divisive. That is the Viva on the Street. And I gotta tell you one thing. Oh my gosh, Winston, get over here. What do you have to say about this madness? You don't understand the madness through which we are living, do you? He doesn't. Peace out. Peace out. Peace out. Never in my life did I ever think I would hear the Prime Minister of Canada demanding premiers, quote, step up, end quote, to violate our constitutional rights with a, quote, vaccine passport, end quote. And to add insult to injury, Justin Trudeau is going to pay for it with our money.
We're not a country that makes vaccination mandatory, for example.
If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's your choice. But don't think you can get on a plane or a train besides vaccinated people and put them at risk.